Hey Brett, how are you doing today?
Good, man. How are you?
I'm doing good, thanks. And thanks for joining us. First off, tell us about Brett and Copyt.
Yeah. So I'm the co-founder and CEO of Copyt. We started Copyt about 5 or 6 years ago, and it's crazy to say that out loud. But essentially, where our story began was I started reselling, well, collecting sneakers in middle school. It's about 2011, and Copyt or my reselling started as a necessity to kind of continue that passion of collecting and really just to be able to afford it. Because as a middle schooler, $100 might as well be $1 million. And for most shoes in this industry, $100 won't get you much. So, um, in fact, my first pair of shoes I got were $80 that I later found out were fake once I received them 3 months after placing the order. There are Chinese characters all over the packaging, and worn to school, still thinking nothing of it until everyone suddenly knew that they were fake, and girls were starting to come up to me in the hallway saying that they knew my shoes were fake because word just spread that quickly. Um, so went home, gave them to my dad, and said, I can't be caught dead wearing these. So he put them on his eBay account, and they sold for about $300, even though, we included that they were not real in the description. Um, and yeah, real pairs went for like 1,500, so it's still relatively cheaper. But
Yeah,
that
that's
started
pretty
to,
wild that
yeah,
even for a fake pair, you were able to, make a big profit on it. And I can only imagine the the middle school Brett and the shame of dealing with that. I mean, middle school is awkward enough for everyone, just those years. So yeah, having the opposite sex,
yeah,
making fun of it or giggling.
doesn't
I
help the
imagine
ego.
no, so that makes sense as a catalyst. No,
Yeah,
bigger driver than good old shame. So,
no.
so then what? What was the first kind of? Um, so that was kind of the epiphany. It sounds like in the beginning of it, and where did you go from there? How did you get started, and even know what a product was going to look like for something like Copit?
Yeah. So from that, it told me that there's clearly money to be made within this industry. And at first, I still was looking at it as great. Now I can resell shoes, and that'll help me afford adding shoes to my collection. And it wasn't until I'd say end of high school that my collection was at a point where, you know, I was only wearing a couple pairs, but had dozens just collecting dust and started to think a bit more practically, especially going to college, that it'd be smarter for me to just sell off a lot of these and instead invest more in the business. And so by the time I was a freshman in college, after doing that for a year or two, full or more full time, I amassed a pretty good resale business. I was doing about $300,000 a year in sales, and hitting a point in my operation where class is just like getting in the way. And, I wanted to be a student and wanted to succeed in school and everything. So looked at reselling as encroaching upon that and in need of a way to just streamline things. And at this point in the industry, there were more marketplaces that people could sell on. And, as any business reselling goods or selling goods, you want to maximize all your channels. And so the need to list across every platform while also trying to stay cognizant of the fact that every item is unique and one could sell on three channels within the same hour period. Like if I'm in
Hmm.
class, that's going to lead to me needing to cancel a sale. And then, that hurts my reputation as a seller, and can even land me with some cancellation fees. So,
Okay, I got you. So the jumping off point was in middle school that you described was just the reselling aha moment of wow, I can make some serious money doing that. You kept doing that through high school. Sounds like we're making great money, especially at that age. But maybe the business was almost you were at a decision point in some ways, right? Of do I want
yeah.
to keep investing this kind of time in it where it's taking away from class or vice versa or whatever. Um, so that, and then in college was the transition over to Copit. Is that right?
Exactly. Yeah. I
Okay.
started to study finance and dealing with a lot of the tools that, bankers use and everything to reach the various marketplaces they can sell equities on. That really ignited the flame in me that, at the time I knew 16-year-olds that were making more than Wall Street bankers just reselling shoes. And
Wow.
the only, real tools that they're provided with are spreadsheets to manage everything. And so putting those two together, it was really just built out of necessity for myself and, a passion for this industry and hobby to mesh the two together and see what could really be made of the industry if resellers were equipped with similar tools to, bankers or just the tools that they need to operate at a scalable way.
Right. Yeah. And I know for a fact in my experience, I'm sure someone smart said this at some point, but the one of the biggest, if not the biggest, things to look for when it's as an entrepreneur or founder and looking for a problem to solve is spreadsheets.
Yeah.
And kind of regardless of the additional context, something that's being done on spreadsheets that spreadsheets are not intended to do or manage
Yeah.
effectively is almost always an opportunity in some form. So that
Yeah.
makes perfect sense. And I assume you did some research, saw what was out there. I mean, I guess at that point you would have known if there was something, since you were already embedded in the industry, so you knew there was nothing that really existed like this. And then how do you at that time, as a, I mean, I assume, correct me if I'm wrong, you're not a developer. You weren't able to just write code and build this thing yourself. So where did you kind of start with, hey, I think I want to build a software product that can do this? There's not a, there's not always a, how to start a company for dummies. I know that for sure. So what did you do?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I was really at a spot where I had no idea where to go. And I was still in college. And I was in an entrepreneurship club where I ended up meeting who's now my co-founder, Sean. And we were tossing around business ideas. And I was like, this is the biggest pain point in my life right now. In my mind, it seems like such a simple, thing to build out, but I've no tech expertise. I have no background in engineering. So it's a pipe dream. And I kind of just wrote it off as like, someone should do it. Hope they do. And, we'll see what
Mm-hmm.
happens. But Sean happened to know actually Krumware, who's right down the street from our campus, and was like, look, I have connections that have the means of building something like this out. If you're serious about it, let's get to work. And I think that was like the kick in the butt that I needed and the vote of confidence to, you know, kind of put my money where my mouth is and get it done and see what could happen from it.
Yeah. So I guess if I can summarize that, entrepreneur club, huge, right? If you hadn't been in
Yeah,
that club, then you may have never met your co-founder, so who knows what um, the journey may have looked like had you not been in that club. So that's a great tip for anyone out there.
yeah,
Find an entrepreneur club to meet, like-minded folks that may have access to resources that you are unaware of, right? Um,
yeah.
and then so you started working with Crom, and I guess they. Uh, by the way, this isn't me playing dumb. I wasn't with Krumware at this time 5 years ago or whatever, 5 or 6 years ago. So I
Yeah.
really don't know the story. I assume they, built the first version of the product, and kind of curious to hear your from what you can remember, how was that talked about and approach. Did you know the term MVP at the time? Is that what you referred to it as, or were you thinking we need a prototype, or do you remember kind of how the communication was around this first version?
Yeah, so yeah, I definitely oversimplified it a moment ago, but essentially after, that there seemed to be a path in sight for how we could get there. There was a
Hmm.
lot of homework in between before we really embarked on that.
Yeah.
So, before anything, we went to some faculty at our college, spoke to them, and just, wanted to first from a compliance standpoint and admin standpoint, figure out like what does starting a business look like. And a lot of them tasked us with, obviously things to handle the admin and compliance, but most of all, like talk to your customers, learn more about the market, do your research, and really pushed us to our breaking point for being as detail oriented as possible and creating a business plan, which was the
Yeah.
biggest, blessing looking back on it because there was so much to be uncovered through that. So, to add some additional context, there was essentially a prototype in the market, and someone really just put together a Google sheet that had some basic formulas in it so people could input their inventory details and then calculate their, profit at the end of the month. And I remember the day that that got shared on social media, the entire market like took it by storm and was like, "This is the best thing ever." When in reality, it didn't solve the, main pain points, but it was a step in the right direction. And so we spoke to a lot of people that we knew were using that, and did, real focus groups to uncover, well, what are the bottlenecks you're still facing, even with, your spreadsheet to manage everything. And then that helped really illustrate or inform our vision of what Copyt needs to be and how we can solve all those pain points. And so it was with that and a lot of sketching, and I'm not the most artistic person ever, so I use that term loosely. That which we took to Krumware to say, hey, this is the problem we want to solve. This is what the current option in the market looks like. And this is what we need to tackle just to like show what direction we want to take this in to these initial users or interested parties that we've spoken to so far.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I want to get into the terminology of this stuff a little bit, not because there's a, right or wrong way to say things necessarily, but because in my experience, and I know at Krumware, in the collective experience as well, a lot of times the terminology for this stuff matters a lot in the perception of what the client or the founder is expecting or intending to do with a certain version of a product, relative to what the developers, whether it's Chrome or anywhere, just what the developers and architects kind of know needs to be done at each stage of the process. So a couple of
Yeah,
quick examples of things that happen along the way. You talked about sketches. Another way of saying that's wireframes or
yeah,
early. Everything's Figma these days. So
yeah,
if you were to start over everything today, those sketches would probably be Figma or something similar, right?
yeah,
Of here's some visual representation of what what we're trying to do, what we think the flow should look like. I think there should be a button here or there. I like this aesthetic or that. I want
yeah,
the user experience to kind of go in this general direction, and then from there, depending on the complexity or what it is that's trying to be built, there's typically some proof of concept phase, and I use that term intentionally, proof of concept. And I found a definition online. I'll cite my source, arc.dev, had a good blog on this, but the way they described a proof of concept was to prove that it can be done. It's a feasible solution. So
yeah,
that could mean you know actual technology limitations if it's something really ambitious, or testing out different integrations and just kind of seeing um, and validating that, right? It's building some rudimentary thing.
hmm,
Let's make sure it's possible. This isn't intended to be used by anyone. This is more of a for the builders and the client or the founder to kind of check the box and say, okay, cool, like this can be done.
yeah.
What was your experience in that way? Like thinking back, was there kind of that iterative process where there was a let's first, build in whatever language was used, but something that would be the equivalent of a proof of concept, or was it more straight to prototyping?
So I will preface this by saying I 100% fell into that trap of, being someone that comes from no tech background whatsoever. When we start talking to, a development firm to build this out, I was like, oh, so we're gonna have the full complete product by the end of this. Like, that's
Yeah,
great.
it's
This
so
thing,
common, so
yeah,
common.
like this process is so simple. Oh my gosh, why does everyone do this?
Hmm.
And definitely had to be like talked down to earth on the fact that, it is an iterative process. And I've actually really come to love that process and seeing that, because I am a user and that I have been since day one, we would come out with, this is the initial mock-up, this is what we want it to look like. And then we'd see that come to fruition in a very basic version where, there may be just a few buttons and a few fields. Then you immediately start using it and you're like, okay, well, clearly we now need XYZ and we need to add that and this and so on
Right.
and so forth. So I would say the initial version was very bare bones. To also provide some context on what Copyt is now, it's an all-in-one software for inventory management, cross-listing, consignment, logistics, really everything a reseller needs to do in one software. But in the initial version, it was it in its simplest form, which was, this is literally a spreadsheet with some color on it,
Right,
and
right.
yeah, like one main workflow, and that's it. But enough to take to someone like you said and be like, look, this is where we want to take this.
Right. And I complete anecdote, but in my experience, um, the biggest trap or kind of misnomer in this realm is the term MVP. And for those that may not be familiar, MVP in this context means minimum viable product, and I'm pretty sure that started with the book The Lean Startup by Eric Ries. He coined that term. I'm pretty sure, could be wrong, but and I don't know. That's going back maybe 15 years, something like that now. So not super recent, especially in the world of tech. That's kind of ancient in the world of tech, but in the real world, it's not that long ago, right? Like this isn't a term that
Right,
existed 30 years ago, or even a concept really. So that became and has become so ubiquitous in terms of people using that phrase. Hey, I want to build an MVP. This is our MVP. It's just everyone says that now, and the first word is minimum. And
hmm
I really believe that drives a lot of the misunderstanding. Is oh yeah, like the perception of a client or founder is I want to build the minimum thing, and that minimum thing must be the MVP, right? When in
right,
reality, the proof of concept we were talking about, and then prototyping, and not to mention the mock-ups and designs and all those things need to come first, because
right,
a true MVP is I'll go back to my definition. It's to prove that this should be built and will be viable, or the minimum set of features necessary to engage with early evangelists to start the learning feedback loop. So
yep,
it's the minimum viable product. Viable should be the focus. Viable in
yeah,
terms of like you want to get people using it, right?
right,
You're not going to get people using a proof of concept or a prototype, but um, so yeah, we see a lot of misunderstanding of those kind of phases where what Krumware maybe embarking on or building initially and what the client has asked for is really one of those earlier phases of, hey, let's prove this out, let's just kind of see if it's possible, or in the case of a prototype, let's just see how it will be built and how it will be used, and it's less about getting any customers or users on it.
right,
And but they have this perception of minimum MVP. We're doing the MVP, it's been a month, where's it at, we got to get customers on it, and it just
yeah,
doesn't work like that. So yeah, it's interesting to hear that you've learned to love and embrace the iterative process, other than being a user. And obviously, that was your whole founder journey, was having the problem yourself. Other than using Copyt and loving kind of that aspect, I'm curious what else made you say that. Like, what is it that you love about iterating and working with technical teams on these types of things?
yeah. I mean, The learning process is so interesting. Um, my background, and given I'm, didn't spend a whole lot of time in it, but that's why I studied in college was finance, and never in a million years would I've imagined even knowing what an API is, or so many other things that I learned through going through the stages of the Crum, and even till today. Um, I love that process of learning, new functions, new ways to implement things, new ways to streamline the different workflows in our platform, ways that we can add more value to our users. That whole problem solving process is a lot of fun to me. But in addition to that, um, you know, it's it's really cool to see a vision that, for me personally, I've had since I was in really middle school, really start to take shape and come to fruition.
Yeah.
And getting all the feedback that comes with that from users that are using it, from our tech team that, they'll spot inefficiencies and throw out suggestions. And, it's just really cool to see that take shape. Um, yeah, it's a beautiful thing.
And are you still like, are you the product manager, or do you have product managers at Copyt now?
I am still definitely wearing that hat,
Yeah.
and I think it's going to be really difficult to take me out of it, just
Yeah, I
because
would
I
imagine.
enjoy it so much. Yeah,
Yeah, and that's another aspect of this that I think it's lost sometimes is the product management aspect, and even if that is the same person in this case, in a lot of cases, the founder or the client, like if effectively whether they realize it or not or call themselves that or not, that's something that has to be done that really has little to nothing to do with the actual code
yeah,
and that being super technical. It's understanding the users and the user experience, and you know
yeah,
bridging that gap between the ultimately bridging, I'm sure there's some better definition, bridging the gap between the users and the actual um, tech, right? Because
yeah,
just having technical folks that can write code with no context or user feedback, or someone that's kind of overseeing the vision of the user is almost useless. Like just
yeah,
having code for the sake of code
yeah,
is not really the point. And I think that's you know a misunderstanding to a lot as well for a lot of folks that haven't been through the process, or been in a tech company or something like that. It's just like, oh well, I know a developer, they can do the thing, right? They know how to
yeah.
write code. And it's like, well, maybe, but there's a whole lot more that goes into it than that.
Definitely. And kind of to piggyback on what you were saying earlier about how so many founders fall into this trap of like the MVP has to be basically a full-fledged working product. Um, I think it comes with the territory of a founder. Most founders, at least I talk to, are very gung-ho about, the first time they see it in fruition, they expect it to be perfect. And
Yeah.
it also comes with like attaching your name to something. That's why you hear from, at least I hear from so many of our advisors, like you don't want to launch too late, because you put so much pride into your product that, you
Right.
know, I'm so overly
Over
critical.
engineer it. Yeah, wait till it's perfect
100%.
and then it's never done. Yeah.
Exactly. And with that, like we hear time and time again from advisors, like you need to take a step back and look at it from like a crawl, walk, run perspective, even with new features and products that we build out. Um, that's something that, I got my first glimpse of during that MVP build out process because I wanted it to be what it is today within the first 2 months. And
Right.
it's frustrating at first when you're like, no, this thing just takes time and you need to dedicate that time to it. Um, but yeah, it's tough being a founder, I think, especially with a non-technical background where you don't know, A, how much time goes into it, but B, like how much time needs to go into it and why that is.
Right. And yeah, to your point, there's extremes on both ends that are a trap and typically lead to failure. The one we were talking about, I was talking about so far, is hey, there are certain things that need to be done to build into a proper product and the first, prototype or proof of concept that comes out is not going to be an actual product in the sense that you're going to have users on it and all that. But the other
Right.
side of that, not taking the technical, kind of stages into account, is this trap that I can say I fell into some extent as a founder of thinking I needed a software product of some sort, whether it was
Yeah.
prototyping, but to think I needed something built before I could really start the market validation. And even though I was given advice and told otherwise and had read books and knew I could, I did some of that, interviewing people and all that, but I really wanted to fast track it and go, okay, I've done
Yeah.
some interviews. I've read now, like, I need to build the thing to put in front of people to really move this forward.
Yeah.
And, um, and so, yeah, that can be the other extreme of like, uh, thinking that you're ready to build something before you've done the work of validating, is this even a problem people are going, willing to
Yeah.
pay to solve in a lot of cases, right? And you don't
Yeah.
necessarily need software to validate that aspect.
Definitely. Yeah, and it's a pitfall that I continue to encounter because, because I love this process so much, I think I've almost gotten addicted to it, where when a user highlights like, this is a new issue that I run into, I'm like, oh great, like let's build a feature of the platform that can take care of that. When in reality,
Yeah,
like maybe that isn't a big enough problem that needs to be solved, or maybe it's one that will have a perfectly fine solution without software intervention.
right. Yeah, that's tough.
Um,
Have you figured out a way to balance those things of knowing when to prioritize and jump on those types of requests versus, hey, let's hold off. I think that may be coming down the road.
Yeah, no, I mean, I feel like we've gotten to a point now where there's just so much on our roadmap that we need to take care of. So it's like a necessity that I've gotten in the habit of being like, not right now. Just we
Yeah,
got other
yeah.
stuff we got to focus on.
The list is
And
too long. Yeah,
yeah, give it some
makes
time,
sense.
and eventually I'll come to my, senses and realize that, yeah, maybe that wasn't necessary all along, and we just crossed that off the roadmap.
Right, right. Yeah, that's fair. I mean, yeah, you said it's tough being a founder. That is one of the biggest understatements I can imagine. I mean, I've done it a couple of times. It's everyone knows it's hard. Everyone hears the stories, but there's just no way to really convey, to folks who haven't done it, like what
Yeah,
what all goes on. It's, for better or worse, social media is, uh, when it comes to, the professional social media, is almost always the good things, right? And the hype and the
yeah,
positive. Very few, relatively very few people are posting about the other, 90% of the time when things are really hard and the product's
yeah,
breaking and your customers are yelling at you and you're running out of money, right? Like all the
yep.
all the realities don't get the headlines. So I'm,
Mhm.
uh, so excited that you guys are doing well and you know successful and still iterating and all that. So keep it up, and yeah, I appreciate you taking the time to speak with me today.
Absolutely, man. I appreciate you having me.
All right, thanks, Brett.
Awesome. See you, man.
See ya.